When a woman truly loves you, the emotions she feels aren't light or casual. They're intense, consuming, and often overwhelming. And this is where most men misunderstand what they're seeing. They assume love always moves toward closeness, communication, and reassurance. But psychologically, love often does the opposite before it does that. It creates distance first. Strong emotions demand regulation. When feelings cross a certain threshold, the nervous system looks for balance. Ignoring you, pulling back, or becoming quieter is not about losing interest. It's about managing emotional overload. If she didn't care, there would be nothing to regulate. Indifference doesn't need space. Love does. From a psychological perspective, this is emotional self-preservation. When attachment deepens, vulnerability increases, and vulnerability awakens fear. Fear of loss, fear of surrender, fear of being affected more than she's ready to admit. Distance becomes a pause button, a way to breathe, a way to regain internal control without cutting the connection completely. This is why the silence is rarely clean. She doesn't disappear. She doesn't detach fully. She remains aware of you. She watches. She checks. She reacts internally, even if she doesn't express it outwardly. Emotional overload doesn't erase attachment. It intensifies it quietly. Men often interpret this pause as rejection because they view attraction linearly. More love should mean more access. But human psychology isn't linear. It's cyclical. Intensity creates retreat. Retreat allows integration. Integration allows deeper connection. What looks like distance is often preparation. Philosophically, this reflects a deeper truth about love itself. Love isn't just closeness, it's confrontation with oneself. When a woman loves deeply, she's not only responding to you, she's facing parts of herself she may have avoided. Her past wounds, her need for control, her fear of dependency. Ignoring you isn't about punishing you, it's about facing those inner tensions without destabilizing the bond. The mistake men make is trying to interrupt this process. They chase clarity, demand reassurance, or fill the silence with explanation, and in doing so, they convert emotional regulation into emotional pressure. Pressure collapses attraction because it turns love into obligation. The man who understands this does something different. He doesn't personalize the distance. He doesn't interpret it as a verdict on his worth. He remains emotionally steady, present without intrusion, interested without insistence. He allows the pause to do its work. This response communicates something powerful at a subconscious level: emotional safety. It tells her, I don't unravel when emotions fluctuate. I don't need constant access to feel grounded. And that steadiness becomes a stabilizing force in her internal world. There's a paradox here most men never see. The more calmly you allow emotional space, the safer love feels. And the safer love feels, the faster resistance dissolves. When she realizes she can step back without losing you and step forward without being overwhelmed, the need to ignore fades. Eventually, emotional overload resolves itself. The silence ends not with detachment, but with clarity, more warmth, more consistency, more honesty, because she's no longer fighting the intensity, she's integrated it. So here's what to reflect on. When a woman pulls back emotionally, don't rush to pull her closer. Ask yourself whether what you're seeing is disinterest or depth, because love doesn't always rush forward. Sometimes it pauses to breathe, and the man who understands, that doesn't lose connection, he becomes the place it returns to. When love becomes real for a woman, it doesn't immediately express itself as devotion or surrender. More often, it first awakens fear. Not because something is wrong, but because something meaningful is at stake. This is the part of female psychology that most men are never taught to recognize. Love doesn't begin with commitment. It begins with exposure. And exposure is uncomfortable. When a woman realizes she truly cares, she also realizes she can be hurt. Her independence feels threatened. Her emotional control feels fragile. Love introduces uncertainty into a system she worked hard to stabilize. So before she moves forward, she pulls back, not to escape you, but to protect herself psychologically. This is a defense response. Vulnerability activates old memories, past disappointments, and unresolved wounds. Even if you've done nothing wrong, love reminds her of times when she felt abandoned, ignored, or lost herself in someone else. Ignoring you becomes a way to slow the emotional momentum and reassert control over her inner world. This is why the distance can feel sudden and confusing. One moment the connection feels strong, even intimate. The next she becomes quiet, distant, or emotionally unavailable. Men often assume this means the feelings weren't real. In truth, the feelings became real enough to be frightening. From a philosophical perspective, love confronts identity. It asks a person to loosen their grip on who they thought they were. For a woman, this can feel like a loss of power before it feels like connection. Ignoring you is not a rejection of love. It's resistance to surrendering too quickly. What matters here is how you interpret this resistance. If you see it as a threat, you react with urgency. You chase clarity. You demand reassurance. You try to anchor her emotions so you can feel safe again, but this only confirms her fear that love will cost her stability and yours. The man who understands this responds differently. He doesn't rush to be chosen. He doesn't pressure her into vulnerability she hasn't processed yet. He stays grounded in himself. He allows space without resentment. And in doing so, he communicates emotional strength. This strength is not loud, it's quiet. It says, I'm not afraid of your hesitation because I'm not afraid of my own emotions. That message is powerful. It reframes love from something overwhelming into something safe. Over time, fear needs proof to dissolve, and the proof she's looking for is not romance, it's stability. She wants to see that love doesn't destabilize you, that your life doesn't pause while you wait, that your self-respect doesn't disappear when access fluctuates. When she sees that, her fear begins to relax. It's important to understand this. A woman who doesn't care won't resist. Resistance only exists where desire exists. Fear only arises when something matters. Indifference doesn't pull away. It drifts away. Love pulls back because it's deciding whether it's safe to stay. Most men fail here because they interpret hesitation as a signal to push harder. But attraction deepens in the opposite direction. It grows when pressure is removed, when patience replaces urgency, when confidence replaces control. Eventually, if you remain steady, something shifts inside her. The fear that once demanded distance starts to dissolve. The silence shortens, the warmth returns, but now it's deeper, more intentional, more secure. Not because you chased it, but because you didn't threaten it. So here's the reflection to carry with you. When low, VE triggers fear, don't try to eliminate the fear, outgrow it. Become so emotionally stable that her hesitation feels unnecessary. Because the man who can hold space for fear without reacting becomes the man love feels safe choosing. When love becomes real for a woman, it doesn't immediately express itself as devotion or surrender. More often, it first awakens fear. Not because something is wrong, but because something meaningful is at stake. This is the part of female psychology that most men are never taught to recognize. Love doesn't begin with commitment, it begins with exposure, and exposure is uncomfortable. When a woman realizes she truly cares, she also realizes she can be hurt. Her independence feels threatened. Her emotional control feels fragile. Love introduces uncertainty into a system she worked hard to stabilize. So before she moves forward, she pulls back, not to escape you, but to protect herself. Psychologically, this is a defense response. Vulnerability activates old memories, past disappointments, and unresolved wounds. Even if you've done nothing wrong, love reminds her of times when she felt abandoned, ignored, or lost herself in someone else. Ignoring you becomes a way to slow the emotional momentum and reassert control over her inner world. This is why the distance can feel sudden and confusing. One moment, the connection feels strong, even intimate. The next, she becomes quiet, distant, or emotionally unavailable. Men often assume this means the feelings weren't real. In truth, the feelings became real enough to be frightening. From a philosophical perspective, love confronts identity. It asks a person to loosen their grip on who they thought they were. For a woman, this can feel like a loss of power before it feels like connection. Ignoring you is not a rejection of love. It's resistance to surrendering too quickly. What matters here is how you interpret this resistance. If you see it as a threat, you react with urgency. You chase clarity. You demand reassurance. You try to anchor her emotions so you can feel safe again. But this only confirms her fear that love will cost her stability and yours. The man who understands this responds differently. He doesn't rush to be chosen. He doesn't pressure her into vulnerability she hasn't processed yet. He stays grounded in himself. He allows space without resentment. And in doing so, he communicates emotional strength. This strength is not loud. It's quiet. It says, I'm not afraid of your hesitation because I'm not afraid of my own emotions. That message is powerful. It reframes love from something overwhelming into something safe. Over time, fear needs proof to dissolve. And the proof she's looking for is not romance, it's stability. She wants to see that love doesn't destabilize you, that your life doesn't pause while you wait, that your self-respect doesn't disappear when access fluctuates. When she sees that, her fear begins to relax. It's important to understand this. A woman who doesn't care won't resist. Resistance only exists where desire exists. Fear only arises when something matters. Indifference doesn't pull away, it drifts away. Love pulls back because it's deciding whether it's safe to stay. Most men fail here because they interpret hesitation as a signal to push harder. But attraction deepens in the opposite direction. It grows when pressure is removed, when patience replaces urgency, when confidence replaces control. Eventually, if you remain steady, something shifts inside her. The fear that once demanded distance starts to dissolve. The silence shortens. The warmth returns, but now it's deeper, more intentional, more secure, not because you chased it, but because you didn't threaten it. So here's the reflection to carry with you. When love triggers fear, don't try to eliminate the fear, outgrow it. Become so emotionally stable that her hesitation feels unnecessary, because the man who can hold space for fear without reacting becomes the man love feels safe choosing. There is a moment in female attraction that most men completely misread, and that moment is when she stops engaging the way she used to, not because she's losing interest, but because she's observing. This is where love shifts from emotion to evaluation. When a woman begins to truly care, she doesn't just feel more, she watches more. At this stage, ignoring you is not emotional withdrawal, it's psychological assessment. She's no longer asking, do I like him? That question has already been answered. What she's asking now is far more serious. Who does he become when I'm not reassuring him? Because long-term attraction isn't built on attention, it's built on consistency. From a psychological standpoint, women are wired to seek emotional safety before emotional surrender, and safety is not proven when everything is easy. It's revealed under uncertainty. When communication slows, when validation is removed, when comfort is interrupted, that's when your true emotional structure shows itself. This is why she creates distance. She wants to see whether your confidence is internal or borrowed from her attention. If your mood collapses, if your tone changes, if you become anxious or resentful, she learns something critical. Your stability depends on her presence, and that is not attractive. It's heavy. But if you remain the same man, focused, calm, purposeful, something very different happens. You communicate without words that your identity is not fragile, that you enjoy connection but don't cling to it, that your life has direction independent of her reactions. This is where respect is born. Philosophically, this is a test of selfhood. Love does to want to absorb you. Healthy attraction wants to meet something solid, not something dissolving. When she ignores you, she's creating a vacuum to see what fills it. Panic fills it for insecure men. Presence fills it for grounded men. And presence is magnetic. This is also where many men sabotage themselves by overperforming. They send longer messages. They explain more. They try to be understood. But attraction doesn't deepen through explanation. It deepens through embodiment. The more you try to prove your worth verbally, the more you imply that your worth is negotiable. Silence, when handled correctly, is not absence. It's composure. When she sees that her withdrawal doesn't disrupt your inner order, she experiences relief. Relief that love doesn't mean managing your emotions. Relief that connection doesn't come with responsibility for your confidence, and that relief quietly turns into desire. This is not manipulation, it's alignment. You're not playing games, you're allowing reality to reveal itself. You're letting her see you as you are, not as you perform under pressure. Over time, something subtle shifts. The distance she created to observe you becomes unnecessary. She reaches out again, not to test, but to connect. And now the energy is different. It's not casual curiosity anymore. It's intentional interest. Most men never reach this stage because they collapse emotionally before it arrives. They mistake the pause for rejection. They rush to fix what isn't broken. They try to control an outcome that can only be allowed. The man who understands this doesn't chase reassurance. He maintains alignment. He doesn't react to silence. He responds to reality. And in doing so, he passes a test he didn't even know was happening. So remember this when she pulls back to observe. Don't step forward to perform. Stand still in who you are, because the strongest signal of value is not how loudly you seek connection, but how calmly you remain whole without it. There is another layer to this dynamic that almost no one talks about, and it's the moment when her ignoring you becomes emotional self-protection not indifference. This is where men misinterpret silence as coldness, when in reality it's containment. When a woman starts to feel deeply, her instinct isn't always to lean in. It's often to slow everything down so she doesn't lose herself in the feeling. Psychologically, intense attraction activates vulnerability, and vulnerability for many women is dangerous territory if they're not certain the ground is stable. So instead of expressing more, she restrains herself. She answers less. She delays. She creates space, not because she doesn't care, but because she cares enough to be cautious. At this stage, her silence is not a message meant for you. It's a boundary she's placing around her own emotions. She's regulating herself. And the question she's quietly asking is this man safe enough for me to feel this deeply without losing control? Here's where philosophy matters. Desire is not reckless, it is selective. Real attraction does not rush toward chaos, it moves toward order. When a woman senses that her emotions are getting ahead of her logic, she pauses the interaction to regain balance. Ignoring you is her way of slowing the emotional momentum so she can observe whether you bring calm or add pressure. Most men fail here because they take her silence personally. They feel excluded, confused, or disrespected, and from that emotional reaction, they respond in ways that confirm her fear. They demand clarity. They push for reassurance. They attempt to force emotional transparency before trust has fully formed. But trust is not created by pressure, it's created by permission, when you allow her the space she's unconscious. Asking for something powerful happens. You demonstrate emotional intelligence. You show that you don't need immediate access to her feelings to feel secure in yourself, that you respect pacing, that you're not threatened by quiet moments. This is deeply attractive because it signals maturity. It tells her you are not overwhelmed by intensity, nor are you dependent on constant emotional stimulation. You can hold connection without gripping it, and that restraint creates safety. From a psychological perspective, safety precedes surrender. No woman can fully open herself to a man she feels she has to manage emotionally. If she senses that her pulling back causes anxiety in you, she associates closeness with responsibility. But if her distance is met with steadiness, she associates closeness with peace, and peace is addictive. This is also the moment where polarity is either strengthened or destroyed. Masculine presence, at its core, is groundedness. It's the ability to remain centered when the emotional environment shifts. When she sees that her silence doesn't destabilize you, she feels free to return on her own terms without guilt or pressure. Eventually, her self-protection relaxes, not because you chased it away, but because you didn't threaten it. She re-engages not out of obligation, but out of desire. And when she does, the connection deepens because it was allowed to breathe. The men who succeed in this phase don't try to interpret every pause. They don't assign meaning to every delay. They trust the flow because they trust themselves, and that trust becomes contagious. So understand this clearly. When her ignoring you is an act of emotional self-regulation, your role is not to interrupt it, but to remain stable within it. Because the man who can stay grounded while she sorts through her feelings becomes the man she feels safe enough to fall into. And the truth is simple and confronting. Love doesn't grow where it is chased. It grows where it is given space to arrive. There is a moment in this dynamic that separates emotionally reactive men from emotionally grounded ones, and it revolves around how you respond when her ignoring you feels intentional. This is not self-protection anymore. This is evaluation. This is when a woman withdraws slightly to see who you really are when you're not being rewarded with attention. At this stage, her silence is a mirror. She is watching how you treat yourself when she steps back. Psychologically, this comes from a deep need to assess value. Attraction is not sustained by words or charm alone. It's sustained by consistency of identity. When a woman begins to feel something real, she doesn't just ask, "Do I like him?" She asks, "Does this man remain himself when I'm not validating him?" So she reduces availability. She becomes slower, less expressive, not to manipulate, but to observe. Most men collapse here. Their behavior changes immediately. They become more eager, more performative, more anxious. They send longer messages. They over-explain. They try to earn back attention as if it were something they lost. And in doing so, they unknowingly communicate a dangerous signal. My sense of worth depends on your response. From a philosophical perspective, this is the core issue. Desire flows toward self-sufficiency, not emotional debt. When attention becomes currency, attraction becomes unstable. A woman does not want to feel like the source of your emotional oxygen. She wants to feel chosen, not needed. So when she ignores you at this level, what she is truly testing is whether your life remains full without her immediate presence. Do you still move with purpose? Do you still speak with calm? Do you still hold boundaries? Or does everything in you lean forward, waiting for her return? The men who pass this phase do something deceptively simple. They don't retreat emotionally, but they don't chase either. They stay warm, but not available on demand, present, but not paused, interested, but not suspended. This creates psychological contrast. She begins to feel something subtle and unsettling in the best way, curiosity mixed with respect. Because when she pulls back and you don't chase, she is forced to confront a new question. What is this man anchored to, if not me? That question generates attraction. There's also a deeper layer here tied to polarity. Masculine energy is directional. It moves forward with or without external reinforcement. When she sees that your direction doesn't change based on her attention, she perceives strength, not dominance, but inner order. And inner order is rare. This is where many misunderstand the idea of ignoring back. This is not about punishment or emotional withdrawal. It's about not abandoning your center. You still respond, you're still kind, but you don't rearrange your life to regain her focus. That balance communicates something profound. I enjoy you, but I don't lose myself in you. And that is what allows desire to breathe without fear. Eventually, her silence dissolves, not because she won, but because she found what she was looking for. Stability, grounding, emotional independence that doesn't shut her out but doesn't chase her either. When she comes back, it's different. There's more softness, more sincerity, less testing. Because she's no longer trying to figure out if you're solid. She's felt it. So remember this. When her ignoring you is a quiet evaluation, your job is not to perform, persuade, or pursue. Your job is to remain rooted in who you were before she ever entered the picture, because the man who doesn't lose himself when attention fades becomes the man she feels drawn to. When it returns, and that's the truth most never learn, attraction doesn't deepen when you prove your interest. It deepens when you prove your stability. By the time you reach this final point, the pattern should be clear. Her ignoring you was never about confusion, cruelty, or mixed signals. It was about alignment. And key point 6 brings everything together into one essential truth. What ultimately makes her stop ignoring you isn't pursuit, pressure, or patience alone. It's emotional safety rooted in strength. When a woman truly loves you or is on the edge of falling deeply, she becomes intensely aware of risk. Love exposes vulnerability, and vulnerability makes her cautious. So she watches closely for one thing above all else. Can this man handle intimacy without losing control of himself? This is where many men misunderstand female psychology. They assume love should create closeness immediately, but in reality, love often creates distance first, because distance reveals character. When she ignores you at this stage, she's unconsciously asking, if I open my heart to him, will I be safe, or will I become responsible for his emotional stability? This is not a romantic question, it's a survival one. A man who reacts with resentment, coldness, passive aggression, or emotional withdrawal fails this test instantly, not because he's bad, but because he's showing that connection destabilizes him, and instability is the enemy of trust. On the other hand, a man who responds with grounded clarity changes the entire dynamic. He doesn't dramatize her silence, he doesn't interrogate it, he doesn't build stories in his head or demand reassurance. He understands something subtle. Love is not maintained by control, but by calm presence. Psychologically, this activates what's called secure attachment signaling. You're showing her that closeness with you doesn't require constant management, that she can step back without chaos, that her emotions are welcome but not weaponized. This is incredibly attractive because now she feels free to return, not pressured to. There's also a philosophical shift that happens here. You stop viewing her attention as proof of your worth. Instead, your worth becomes the foundation from which you offer attention. That inversion changes everything. You're no longer reacting to her behavior, you're responding from your values, and women feel that difference immediately. This is why, paradoxically, the man who is hardest to shake emotionally becomes the man she feels safest loving. He doesn't make her responsible for his happiness, yet he allows her presence to add meaning to his life. He doesn't withdraw when things get uncomfortable, but he also doesn't chase comfort at the cost of self-respect. At this stage, her ignoring you often fades naturally, not because you demanded clarity, but because she found it. Your consistency answered the question she was too afraid to ask directly. And when she re-engages, it's no longer playful distance or emotional testing. It's more intentional, more open, more real, because now she's no longer measuring your reactions. She's considering your place in her life. This is where men who've done the inner work win without trying. They don't need strategies anymore. Their presence itself becomes the signal, calm, directed, emotionally literate, but not emotionally dependent. So if there's one insight to take with you, let it be this: when a woman ignores you at the deepest level of attraction, she's not asking you to chase her harder. She's asking you to stand firmer in yourself, because the man who can remain steady in silence becomes the man she no longer wants distance from.